Good evening, everybody. My name is Nitin. I'm from Open Network for Digital Commerce. It's truly a privilege being here today evening at Hyderabad at this RAI Hyderabad Retail Summit. I'm also truly privileged in the sense that all the early speakers, including the chairman of RAI, the CEO of RAI, the head of marketing, our chief guest, Principal Secretary Jayesh Ranjanji, everybody's spoken about ONDC, and it's truly a privilege to follow that up with the talk on ONDC. So let me use the next 10 minutes to quickly run you through what ONDC is, what we're trying to do, and then, happy to take questions or have one-on-one conversations. I'm available for the rest of the evening. Thank you. So moving ahead. So become a part of India's digital commerce revolution, right? So what are we, kind of set up to do, right? And yeah, so am I audible? Yeah. So if you look at it, retail e-commerce penetration in India is negligible compared to, slightly larger, economies or economies we typically end up comparing ourselves at, 4.3% versus, 20-25% in countries like UK, China, the South Korea, right? What is even more worrying is on the left side, what you see on the Kirana side, it's 0.125% in terms of the total Kirana base in India, which means it's almost non-existent, right? And further on the right side, you will see that it is further limited as you go away from tier 1 cities, right? As you move to tier 2, tier 3, the penetration drops suddenly. While tier 2, tier 3 penetration is picking up, there is a lot of choice for tier 3, people, and therefore, there is interest. But in terms of overall penetration, it still lags and it's pretty small. So while e-commerce is pretty buzzy, right? The actual overall penetration from the total market is still very nascent. It's still very early days for e-commerce in India. And we are set out to try and turbocharge this effort so that the retail e-commerce penetration improves substantially. Moving on. So what are the things that ONDC set out to do, right? So if you look at it, increase the gross merchandise value, increase sale. I mean, I'm sure all the sellers here would want to figure out how the sale goes up. Expand the coverage of retailers using digital commerce. If you are online, are you selling enough online? If you're not online, can we bring you online? And of course, expanding the share of Indians using e-commerce, which is largely looking at more customers coming in, right? And also amplifying the geographic coverage. I spoke about tier 2, tier 3 towns and beyond, where penetration continues to be limited, and bringing in as many retailers as consumers online there to turbocharge e-commerce is what we are trying to do at population scale. And it's a population scale inclusion project. Moving on, what are the key factors in the value chain? And for those of you who are here as sellers, these may be important points to look at, right? You are very limited by the choice to be online, right? You put up a website, the whole, digital marketing is a big, area that becomes a challenge, right? You go work with the existing platforms. There are 1-2 platforms which predominantly have the entire market. 60-70% of market is covered by 2 platforms. And therefore, you're limited by choice, right? Also, you do not have any opportunity to negotiate terms, right? So, you go there, you look at the available terms, you sign up or you don't sign up, right? There's nothing called a negotiation or a conversation or, an ability to set terms that are favorable to your business, your product, your way of doing business, right? And also as small players, you have barriers to switching the value chain, right? Think about if as a small seller, you want to go online, right? It start by setting up a catalog, setting up a website, or joining one of the platforms and, getting everything ready, right? Then you have to sort of start thinking of how do you bring customers, right? There's digital marketing, customers coming in. Then there is the entire supply chain, online order management, ordering, then the entire distribution in terms of dispatch, logistics, etc. And then there is returns, customer complaints. The whole hog is pretty large for an average business to take on as a complete solution. And for most players, it becomes a huge barrier to adoption, that how do they do all of this, right? And in some form, the platforms have kind of worked to solve all of this for you, but then you don't get to work on your terms, right? So moving on, how do we try to solve this, right? The core design of ONDC revolves around 2 principles, interrelated principles, unbundling and interoperability, right? By unbundling, I think, this is a little bit of a mental model change, which you will need to do. And I don't know whether 10 minutes is sufficient time, but let me make an attempt, right? So think of a platform-centric world. I mean, we use several platforms for buying several things as consumers, right? And some of your sellers are on platforms as sellers, right? For a moment, assume that the buyer side and the seller side of the platform are two different businesses, right? And they can interact with other platforms as well, right? So today, for example, in the ONDC world, you can go to the Paytm app in Hyderabad, right? Open it up, fire it up, check it out. And you can look for, say, grocery or food, right? From brands that you're familiar in your vicinity, which have been onboarded by somebody else, right? Paytm has no relationship with these brands. The network has enabled it, right? Both sides have come together on the network. Paytm is what we call the buyer side, the consumer side, right? And there is another app, say a Magic Pin or an Innorbits, which is onboarded a seller based in Hyderabad, and they are the seller side. So the platform has been kind of split into two parts, which is the unbundling, which is the buyer side and the seller side is split, right? And they interact over the platform. Now, what's also important is interoperability. Why are we trying to do this, right? If you just split a platform, it doesn't mean much, right? But if the buyer side on any platform can talk to the seller side on any other platform on the network, then the network effect starts to take effect, right? So think of what are the advantages, right? As a seller, you join any one seller app, right? You are available to a buyer across every buyer app on the network, right? It doesn't matter. So unlike today's platform world where if you want to be on 3 platforms, it's 3 onboardings, right? It's 3 channels for getting orders. You have to, work with each of them, work with your fulfillment, look at your metrics, look at your payments, everything, right? Here, everything comes to you via your seller app and you are visible to the entire universe of buyers on the buyer app, right? And you're not happy with your seller app, you can port to another seller app and yet carry your profile, right? Some of the things that you can't do today, right? And again, on the buyer side, everything that you want to buy, right, that's available on the network, potentially you can buy from a single buyer app, right? You don't need to go to one place to buy grocery, one place to buy airline tickets or bus tickets or book an Uber. Everything is available on the network. As long as your buyer app offers it, you can do it. So essentially, unbundling and interoperability, 2 core principles, right? It takes a little time to get familiar with this. It's not the most obvious thing because it doesn't exist today anywhere in the world, right? So it takes a little time to kind of, absorb, understand it, and kind of relate to it. So I'll give you a few moments and a few more slides to process that. Right? Moving ahead, so this is what the ONDC network at scale looks like, right? You have the network in the center, right? You have the buyer app at the top, which is where those of you are only consumers or, when you wear your consumer hat, that's where you are, right? At the bottom, you see the seller apps. This is where you have onboarded your businesses, right? Your catalogs, everything have been onboarded, pricing, inventory, everything has been onboarded. And then the logistics apps come in wherever there is a delivery, right? If it's a digital product, there is no logistics involved, but all 3 category of players are connected to the ONDC network and help the buyer and the seller talk to each other and fulfill a transaction, right? That's broadly what, the ONDC network looks like. Now, where are we today, right? So ONDC was incorporated about a year and a half ago, right? And we kind of got started maybe 6 to 9 months ago. This is where we are today, right? On the top, you see the buyer apps that are currently live, right? You have Spice Smart Shop, Craftsvilla, Paytm. That beautiful logo in the middle is Pin Code, which is the new app from PhonePe. PhonePe has built a ONDC exclusive app for local commerce, as they call it, Infinity Store, right? And while it's only live in Bangalore, but the rest of the apps, as consumers, you can right now open it up, put your PIN code and see what you want to buy and what are the different categories available, right? And at the bottom is the apps that are onboarding the sellers, right? And if you want to, go online quickly as a seller, this is the guys you need to be talking to. Some of them are here. Please feel free to reach out to them, talk to them. If you need any help from us, please tell us. And you can quickly go online, right? You could also come into the network as one of the apps themselves. If you have a large enough technology team, you have the interest to, build that interface, the integration, and the capability, you could always be sitting here as a seller app, right? If you are a niche player, you want to do something on the buyer app side, you have a niche consumer base. I'm talking to somebody who's trying to build college students as a niche food delivery app base, right? It's not a very large consumer base, but very niche base. People are trying to be there on the buyer app, competing with the biggest, right? And if you look at the right side, right, the logistics apps come in. So whenever an order is placed on the buyer app, right, the seller app is the one fulfilling it, and the logistics guys are the one doing delivery. So at a very high level, this is what the current network looks like. So Interestingly, about 50 million potential buyers are already online. These apps have that kind of consumer basis. And 21 seller application, 31,000 sellers, and 38 lakh SKUs, right? So this is growing. This number, this is the latest number. There's another slide where the number is not updated. I couldn't while I was traveling, but this is as of yesterday, and this number moves, right? To give you how fast and how quickly we are trying to scale. In November and December, we were 800 sellers, right? That number that is 31,000 was 800 3.5 months ago, right? And we've onboarded 30,000 sellers and 38 lakh SKUs, right? The SKUs, I think, about 15,000 at that time, right? So all of this onboarding has happened at 3. We're doing this at scale. All of these apps, as we speak, are talking to different sellers across India, onboarding restaurants, onboarding retail stores, retail brands, and brands are coming, brands of all sizes, right? Big, small, local, are all coming online, right, as we speak, right? Moving on, this is the indicative pipeline. A lot of these brands are at different stages. The 32 live are on top. The advanced stages ones are here, and there are underway, right? And this list is expanding. There is a live version of this on our website. You can see all the guys coming in and at different stage of integration. Yeah, so like I said, you can go to any of these apps and try placing an order. It gives you a sense of what is available. Depending on the app, there could be some variation in the categories. All apps don't want to do all categories, right? So you'll typically see food, grocery, home decor, fashion, among some of the brands that are live, depending on the city. They are live right now, yeah? So yeah, so when we look at what are the domains that we're currently working on, there is electronics, fashion, agri is pretty big. We're talking to a lot of FPOs to bring in farmers online, right? And of course, mobility, we have Namayatri in Bangalore, right, which is doing 25,000 trips a day, right? So that's also one of our bigger success stories. Home and kitchen, wholesale B2B, and many more, right? Potentially, ONDC's goal is that every domain, every store in India should have the opportunity to come online and be able to do business, right? And that's where we kind of very strongly collaborate with industry organizations like RAI and take their support in bringing as many people online. Moving on, so I think these are the benefits. I'm only going to talk about the sellers. I think that's the core that I want to focus in the absence of time, right? I'm already 1 minute over. Discoverability by the entire buyer universe. I emphasized on this. You join on one seller app, right? Like the internet, if somebody's searching for you, you'll be visible on every buyer app, right? You don't need to do anything else. You don't need to go join multiple platforms, right? Maintain one-time single registration, I think I explained that. Low-cost access to complete value chain. Autonomy and rules in terms. So allow me a moment here to explain how this is very critical, right? Typically, when you do business with another business, right? Suppose you join a platform, right? You sign a set of rules. There are terms and conditions agreed, right? We have made this fairly dynamic, right? Every time a buyer app is sending you a request for a goods or service that you can serve, right? They send you the terms of the deal live, right? This I need 2% buyer commission or 3% or 5% buyer commission. It comes on the deal, right? It comes on the request, on the API, right? You can choose to, depending on how your business is, what your terms are, what your appetite is, choose to respond or not respond to it, right? You could very well say, I don't want to fulfill this order if I have to pay 5%, right? So that's there today, and we're also looking at building online negotiation, right? So you could say that, no, I will pay 4% or I'll pay 3.5% and send back to the buyer app, and it may happen. In B2C, that may not be such a big thing, but in B2B, we expect that to be a fairly large part, and we'll see how it evolves, right? Increased profitability, we expect the cost structures of the overall industry, right? So what is ONDC? ONDC is what in popular parlance is called digital public infrastructure, right? Because the ability to come online is now common, right? There isn't costs that every platform has incurred. So if you look at it, every platform has typically incurred a technology and a product cost, right? A seller onboarding and management cost, and a customer acquisition and management cost, right? All of this, every platform kind of spends, right? So if you look at it, what ONDC is doing, we're commonizing it, we're bringing a lot of elements which are common, which don't need to be repeated, right? One good example is to look at, so some of you would be familiar with the passive infrastructure companies like Indus, right, in the tower business, right? Every telecom company at one point in time was trying to put up a ground-based or a rooftop tower, right? But ultimately, all of them were putting up active infrastructure with limited utilization. And somebody came up and said, on this tower, I can have all 5 companies, right? Why is everybody spending 30 lakhs on a ground-based tower when everything can be common, right? And somewhere that's what we are also trying to do, right? We bring in common infrastructure, which brings the cost structure for the overall online transaction to come down. Therefore, the commission structures hopefully will come down and benefit everyone. Right? So while I say that ONDC is an open network, capability and infrastructure, we are not an application, platform or a product. What that means is we do not own the customer or the seller. We do not have visibility on what exactly is happening on the order. Right? We have very, very high level metadata to track the overall network health. Who bought what is not something we track. Right? We don't have access or visibility to it. There are infinite models fertile for innovation. Like it takes you a minute to kind of absorb how ONDC is different from how we do business today, right? There are different models people are experimenting to say that, okay, in this opportunity, I can think of business differently, right? Different value propositions can be built, different, business models can be built, right? Like one of the things we're seeing is people are thinking about moving away from transaction-based commissions, right? Especially for stronger seller-side relationships. There are a lot of conversations that say, why don't we move to subscription, right? Why don't we become a SaaS, right? That my cost of managing you is 2,000 rupees, right? I'll charge you a 20% margin on it, 2,400 rupees a month, no matter how many orders you do, right? So suddenly, your cost structures may change. So many such things happening as we speak, eliminates the need for a central intermediary. So in this transaction, it's important to understand ONDC is not an intermediary. We're just a network that facilitates. We don't govern the transaction. The transaction is between the two apps which are facilitating the transaction between the buyer and the seller, right? We are a market and community-led initiative. I'll talk about it in 1 or 2 slides later. We're not a single model. We're not a central intermediary. We're also not a regulator, right? We don't have a regulatory role. We don't determine pricing, commission structures. None of that is governed by the network, right? We are a technology, layer that helps the buyer and the seller interact, right? Moving on, it's a truly made in India digital revolution for the world. There's no such precedence of a similar network existing anywhere in the world. We have a stellar advisory council, which guides us with industry stalwarts. Kumar sir is here, who kind of guide us and guide this entire effort, right? This is our journey so far. We were set up in December, of 22 when the company was kind of set up, right? December 20 is when ONDC was registered. We are a Section 8 company. And we had a beta launch in Bangalore in September. We're testing. We are live in a bunch of cities. So these numbers have changed. The previous slide was more accurate. We are 38 lakh products and about 200 cities, right, across India, where, different sellers have been onboarded, right? So we are a Section 8 company. These are some of our marquee investors who kind of, back us and, on behalf of the government, support us and help us set up this entire business. Yeah, so that's broadly ONDC from me. With that, I conclude the presentation. I hope I've not taken too much time. I'm happy to take questions or have a follow-up one-on-one. Thank you.